we're on rule, what rule are we on? 13, is it?
13.
Yeah. Let me see. Let me find rule 13. Maybe I better read it just to make sure we're grounded here. The magician must recognize the four, note in his work the shade of violet they evidence, and thus construct the shadow. When this is so, the shadow closes itself and the four become the seven. Like we said last time, the average man on the street wouldn't have a clue what that means, but we're talking about the four, and the fours are the different quaternaries. In the creation, in the materialization from an idea, a thought, down to physical reality, there's always a quaternary or a series of quaternaries involved. And this is symbolized by the building of the city of the New Jerusalem, or the descending of the city of New Jerusalem. It says the city lieth foursquare. In other words, for something to materialize from heaven to earth, it needs to be built on four squares, or in other words, a quaternary to anchor it here upon the earth. And the four is recognized in a number of different ways. For instance, he talks about in the individual, he builds character, ability, unselfishness, and focuses on meditation. These are four principles. And to this, he says the magician must add occult recognition. And occult recognition is being able to basically sense truth and in things that are not obvious to the average person. This rule is an interesting example of many connotations and numerous correspondences that can be conveyed in a few simple words. And Tibetan says this about it. You know, read his words. Sometimes he words his thoughts so concisely that the best thing to do is to read them, and I'll read this long paragraph here. He says, this means literally that the magician must be in a position to discriminate between the different ethers and to note the special hue of the different levels, thereby ensuring a balanced building of the shadow. He recognizes them in the occult sense. That is, he knows their note and key and is aware of the particular type of energy they embody. Now, how many people do you know out there that knows their note and key? Probably not that many. This is something that some of these things, he says, is things for us to contemplate for our future development and abilities. Enough emphasis has not been laid upon the fact that the higher three levels of the etheric plane are in vibratory communication with the three higher planes of the cosmic physical plane. And they are, with their ensphering fourth level, have been called in occult books the inverted Treatise. And it is this knowledge which puts the magician in possession of three types of planetary force and their combination, or the fourth type, and thus releases for him that vital energy which will drive the idea into objectivity. As the different types of forces meet and coalesce, a dim, shadowy form closes itself upon the vibratory, astral, and mental sheaths, and the idea of the solar angel is attaining definite concretion. So he talks about the etheric levels in the cosmic physical. Can somebody tell me what the cosmic physical is? Do you remember?
Cosmic physical is the first, is the lowest level of the planes. Then you have cosmic, astral, cosmic, mental, and so on up. And it's
Right. And when he says cosmic, he's referring to very high levels of existence. So the cosmic physical is the 7 planes of the cosmic, which is composed of the physical, astral, mental, Buddhic, atmic, and so on. And these 7 planes, which are very high, anything above the mental is very high to us, compose just one plane of a higher plane still called the cosmic planes. And for instance, the planetary logos, is his main consciousness is on the cosmic mental plane, so he hasn't even gone up above the cosmic mental, and so on. And the solar logos, I think he's on the cosmic Buddhic or something like that. He's a plane or so above the planetary logos. So these planes are very intricate. Now, in the cosmic physical, we have the 7 planes, but in the physical itself, in the physical of the 7 planes in our cosmic physical, which is like the first 3 of the physical, then the astral, emotional, and then the mental. In the physical itself, we have 7 subplanes, which are ethers. The first 3 are the physical, in other words, the solid, and then liquid and gas. Those are the first 3 ethers. The fourth ether is invisible, and the higher 3 are also invisible to normal viewing. Now, we have done in our group meditations where we've seen the ethers that are connected to our body. We have an etheric double, and the etheric double stretches out just a millimeter or so from your skin. And when you hold your hand up next to a smooth surface, you can see the etheric body. And so that's composed of the 4 ethers, and the most visible is what's called the 4th ether. Now, the quaternary, one of the quaternaries are the higher 4 ethers in the lower physical. And now on some of the other planets, for instance, that appear dead, like Venus, we've sent probes there and doesn't seem to be any life there, but in the higher ethers, and the 3rd and 4th ethers, there is life there. So there's life on many of these planets that appear dead, but the life is in the higher ethers. And also there's probably life in the astral and mental elements of some of these planets also. But in the higher ethers, there is life in many places in the universe that appears like there's no life there. Okay, any comments or questions on that before we move on? Kind of interesting subject to contemplate.
There is a chart in the Bailey books that identifies all of those planes, and all of this chart is the entire cosmic physical plane, which has all these subdivisions.
Yeah, just a cosmic physical is more than we can handle, you know.
Yeah, it's good to have this chart available when you're reading this.
Yeah, it's a good chart. Good chart. But takes a little contemplation to figure it all out. It says recognizing the 4 ethers is important, but there is an important quaternary that represents that which must be recognized. First, he must recognize the four that constitutes the one. In other words, the first quaternary he must know, and know well, is that which he essentially is himself. That is, he's his physical body, his soul, mind, and brain is the second, and third is his spirit, soul, and body within the great whole. And then the whole part as the combination represents the fourth. And this is sometimes produces a quaternary. You have the Trinity plus the Trinity as a whole. Just like in the beginning was just God, and God projects the Trinity. And so the one great life projecting the Trinity produces a quaternary. And so everything begins with a one, a Trinity, and then a quaternary. He says, we must recognize the city that stands foursquare. We talked about that. And he must understanding the meaning of man, the cube. And this in three ways. First, himself as a human being. Okay, I guess most of us realize we're human beings. And second, his fellow man in relation to himself and the whole. That's the second thing he must recognize. And the third, he must recognize the fourth kingdom in nature, the human kingdom, viewing the entire kingdom as an entity. And so these three plus the understanding of them, the whole as a unit, produces another quaternary that the student must recognize. He says the student must be aware of the kingdom in which he belongs. And he quotes from an ancient Atlantean text, shedding some light on this point. Quote, at the four corners of the square, the four angelic are seen. Orange they are, but veiled by a rosy light. Within each form, the yellow flame is seen, and round each form, the blue. Four words they utter forth, one for each human race, but not the sacred sound which bringeth forth the seventh. Two words have died away, four sound today. One sounds in realms so high that man can enter not as man. Thus the seven words of man ringing round the square, passing from mouth to mouth. Each day of man, the words take form and different seem, and the words will be as follows. From out of the north, a word is chanted forth, which means be pure. From out of the south, the word peals out, I dedicate, and he's got ellipsis marks there, which means there's something that he can't give us. And from the east bringeth a light divine. The word comes swinging round the square, love all. And from the west, the answer is thrown back, I serve. So here we have a quaternary again, north, south, east, and west, another quaternary, and then these words associating with them. And from the north is usually symbolic of a connection with spirit. So from the north, the words are chanted forth, be pure. And he makes an interesting statement here too. It says, these sounds are in realms so high that man cannot enter as man. And that's an interesting statement. Can you imagine going in a place so high that you cannot enter as a human being? So it's kind of like we did in our meditation. We visualized ourselves all as being like a ball of light rather than in bodies. So perhaps he's referring to something like that. He says, but in thoughts of purity, dedication, love, and sacrifice are summed up the nature and destiny of man. So again, he's got another quaternary: purity, dedication, love, and sacrifice. Overall spiritual attainment must be the focus. Part of our progress takes place when we realize the quaternary of the cross, the symbol of the crucifixion. The difficulties we go through in achieving liberation is a symbolic crucifixion upon the cross of matter. So this is another quaternary, the cross. And the cross, like I say, is a symbol of we, in a way, we are undergoing a symbolic crucifixion because we have left a beautiful, peaceful, blissful existence to descend as a monad down to the kingdom of the souls, which was quite a descent just to go there. Now, keep in mind that in the kingdom of the soul is really terrific compared to here, but that's the midway point. When you go back to the pure spiritual essence, it's even much higher still. So it was quite a descent just to go down and to the level of the soul. And then the soul projects itself down here, and it's kind of a little bit like a crucifixion for in other words, it's kind of a tough thing to do, but it's important for our progress. So we have that quaternary, and each point on the cross is symbolic of something different. And he compares it to 4 astrological signs. He says, in Taurus, the disciple must be able to say, I seek illumination and am myself the light. Okay. Instead of seeking the light, we must realize that the light is within us. And by saying that we are the light, it helps us to become more enlightened ourselves. Remember the statement that all the many of the teachers are out there saying that if you want to achieve something, put your mind as if you're already there. So instead of seeking the light, see yourself as the light. Now in Leo, he will say, I know myself to be the one. I rule by law. Okay. Leo is into self-understanding, so he must see himself to be the one upon whom he leans on. And many times in life, you reach a point where you just can't lean on anybody else. The only person to lean on is yourself. So that's where it all comes back to eventually when the great tests come. Can you lean upon yourself and then rule by law? And then it's the third, the word will utter forth in Scorpio. Illusions cannot hold me. I am the bird that flies with utter freedom. And this is an important point for the disciple, is to realize the principle of freedom, and the only person that can unlock the cage to let him be free is himself. You have to unlock the prisons that hold you through your own consciousness and realize you are the bird that flies with utter freedom. You don't wait around for somebody to come free you. You have to realize you are the bird that flies with utter freedom. If you will let yourself, you can have all the freedom that you desire. In Aquarius, the words are spoken will be, I am the server, I am the dispenser of living water. Okay. So in other words, the general tendency of human beings is to look for other people to deliver them, other people to free them, other people to bring them light. Instead, the end product is to see yourself as the dispenser of living water. You are the ones, and by being the dispenser of living water, you yourself will be replenished and have all you need in order to serve. But you must look upon yourself as being full, as being like Christ, because he is the example. When Christ was here, did he look toward any other human being to give him everything he needed? He only looked to within, to God, was all he looked toward. And then he had everything he needed. He never asked for any favors from anyone. Everyone was always asking favors from him. That was because he had a different consciousness than everybody else. Everybody else around him was needy. He was not needy at all. He had everything he needed because of the state of consciousness that he was in. Other quaternaries are to be mastered, or the Four Noble Truths. He says there's quite a few quaternaries. He just names a couple. Four Noble Truths, the meaning of the four Gospels, understanding the significance and the purpose of the four elements, earth, water, fire, and air, the four kingdoms, minerals, animals, vegetables, and humans. And so a lot of different ones. The Noble Truths are an interesting quaternary to explore. And we covered it quite a bit in the book, The Lost Key of the Buddha. We'll just go over the Four Noble Truths just quickly here. The first Noble Truth to recognize is the existence of sorrow and suffering. Now, in the book, we say, well, that sounds pretty simple. Everybody pretty much realizes that there's suffering. And then let me read the response by John here. He says, suffering is linked to form and manifestation, and form is linked to time. Form is manifested in the three worlds. The first world is a physical etheric, the second is emotional astral, the third is the world of mind. Form as it manifests in these three spheres has both a beginning and an end. And when intelligence attaches its desire to the continuation of form, then suffering is the result when the form ends. The first great truth is that when consciousness descends into the worlds of form, then suffering is a natural result and unavoidable. So, interesting point is that where there's a beginning and an end to anything, and there's a beginning and end to all form, that means that if you're taking joy over something that involves any form, which almost anything that brings happiness in regular society is related to form of some kind, that form is going to end. And when it ends, then there's suffering. And so we live in a world where there's beginnings and endings, and in between we have joys and happiness, but then when it all ends, then there's a certain amount of suffering. For instance, you meet the love of your life, you're all thrilled, you're happy, you may have the happiest marriage you could ever have, and then your partner dies. And you have intense suffering. Now, this happened to Artie's brother. His wife, love of his life, died of cancer, and he was so upset he's become an atheist pretty much because he was really mad at God. Because so his life was really going great, and then his wife got cancer and died. And so we have these things happen. And this is something, the first noble truth is to recognize this, that this suffering is inevitable. We have good and bad times, but there's that we recognize that it's there.
Yeah. Are you on mute?
Yeah, I see Darren showed up. Good to see you, Darren.
Sorry, that.
The second truth is the cause of suffering. What is the cause? Okay, anybody got a comment on that? What's a cause of suffering?
When you see yourself as the form, you see yourself as the object.
Yeah, right. That's a large part of it. And the Buddhists say the main thing is our desires. We're attached to our desires, and like Ed says, that's connected with form. Desire is never completely satisfied and is often frustrated. This prevents sustained happiness, lays the groundwork for suffering. So desire, we desire all kinds of things, and the teaching is basically that we desire certain things, but no matter how much we get what we desire, we're never completely satisfied. We always want a bit more, and then when our desires are frustrated, this creates suffering. Okay, that's a second noble truth, understanding that the cause of suffering is related to our desires. The third has to do with the end of suffering. It says, because suffering is related to desire, the end of suffering can come through the elimination of desire. Now that's a way the Buddhists will sometimes phrase it, but it's not entirely technically correct in the fact that desire has all kinds of different levels. God created the universe because he desired to have a universe created, so and there's higher and lower desires, but desire connected with a form nature. This needs to be controlled in such a way that we're not attached to the desire. So, for instance, we had a ball game yesterday, BSU against San Jose State, and we started off really bad shape. We got 2 touchdowns down behind, and it looked like we were going to lose. And so I was, like when I was identifying with the game, I could realize, boy, this, if we win or lose, I'm going to be really happy or really sad, one way or another. Well, we wound up winning, so I'm temporarily happy. But sooner or later, we're going to lose another game, then I'm going to be upset. So, but what we have to do, we have to not attach ourselves too much. So we can allow our personality to kind of go with the flow, enjoy things in life that are good to enjoy, be upset, but our true self, not allow our true self to be attached to it, but operate more as an observer. Observe yourself being really enjoying the game or being upset with the game, but not absorbed in it so much that it controls your peace of mind. And so this is an important point that DK points out, is to take the viewpoint of the observer. So what you try to do, Ed? You try to be the observer?
I've always been the observer.
You look like a good observer. I bet you're pretty good at that. He says the fourth is the path to liberation is the eightfold path. By following this eightfold path, he says we can put ourselves eventually in a state of consciousness to where we can overcome suffering and not be too detached. The first is having the right view of things. Second, the right resolve. Third, right speech. Fourth, right action. 5, right livelihood. That's an interesting one to throw in that you don't get in a lot of teachings, right livelihood. In other words, we all have to go out and make a living and take care of our physical needs, but do it in such a way that it doesn't hurt us spiritually. We don't take advantage of our neighbor. We are able to contribute to society and so on. Right effort, right mindfulness. Mindfulness is something the Buddhists put a lot of attention on. In other words, always pay attention to what's going on. Now, in meditation, they say pay attention to your body, your breathing, your heartbeat, all these things. But this extends to paying attention to what's going on around you, what people think. Maybe somebody you're close to has a problem that they haven't told you about, that if you were paying attention, you could tune into it and help them out. And because oftentimes when people have problems, they just keep it to themselves. But if you're mindful, you can kind of tune into that when maybe just the way they're looking or the atmosphere around them. Maybe sometimes you just need to approach this person, say, anything on your mind, anything I can do to help? Then right concentration, which he points out that this is done with like meditation, contemplation, focusing on the inner world. These 8 things, according to Buddha, are the key to liberation and eventually attaining nirvana. He says, when the white magician has succeeded, he can say, desire holds me not. With freedom I now stand. I desire all and nothing. I live and die, am offered up and rise again. I come and go at will. Earth lies beneath my feet, and water washes my form. The fire destroys that which impedes my way. Master of the air am I. Through all the world of forms my feet have passed. All now exists for me, and I, the servant of the whole, persist. So those are kind of words spoken from the viewpoint of one who has achieved mastery, and this is where we aspire to be in that point to where all things seem to be under our control, and we have liberation to be able to come and go as we will. Okay, he says there are many quaternaries that could be pointed out, but we'll focus on the 4 ethers having 4 shades of violet. Now he says a secret not revealed is whether the violet light in color, the light color is the highest or the lowest of the 4 ethers, and that will not be revealed for some time to come. Now he doesn't say why this is important, but he says the 4 ethers have different shades of violet, from light to deep violet, okay? And he says it's a mystery as to whether the deep violet is in the higher ethers or the lower ethers. Anybody got an idea of which direction the violet may go? He says this is a great secret. If you guess, you got a 50% chance of being right.
Well, I would guess that the light ethers would be the higher ether.
You would think so, but maybe not. Has anyone ever read Michael Newton's books?
Yeah, I read them a long time ago.
Yeah, he took like over 3,000 people back in between lives, and one of the interesting things he discovered, which I think his discovery can tell us which direction the ethers go. He says that when a new soul is born, it comes into existence, it radiates, it's white. It radiates a white light, which is kind of opposite of the way you'd think. You'd think the white light represents the end of evolution. But he says the white light really represents the beginning of evolution, and then they go through pretty much the spectrum, red, orange, yellow, and the more advanced souls are blue and then indigo, and as they get more advanced, the color gets more intense. So what this tells us here, if we apply it to this, the more advanced ethers perhaps have the more intense light. So perhaps the fourth ether has the lightest color, and in the first ether, the highest ether, may have the deepest color if the correspondence to what Michael Newton produced from his regression is accurate. And that's interesting in the fact that that there's an intensity with the colors. I know when I've seen auras, the interesting part about seeing the auras is the auras are much harder to see. The colors in the auras are much harder to see than the physical colors we see about us. But when they are seen, the colors in the auras are much brighter than any colors on the earth. So it's interesting. They're harder to see, but when you do see them, they're more impressive than the colors here. Like an orange or yellow in the aura, when you see it clearly, it will be a more pristine and pure and bright color than a yellow or an orange here upon the earth. So perhaps the higher ethers have a more intense color about them, would be my guess on this. Now, why this is a great secret, I don't know. I don't now understanding this may be a key to something, but he doesn't really say what it is. Maybe it's a key that we're supposed to like figure out how to use it. He says the higher ethers correspond to spirit, soul, and body, and the fourth represents the interaction of all these four ethers. So there's a lot of, he talks about these quite a bit, but he doesn't say how to access them, how to use them, how to use these shades of violet in creation. But there's something about understanding these shades of violet that will allow the magician to do some very magical things. And at the beginning of this rule, remember he said that he couldn't tell us all the details about it because it's too dangerous, because he says the complete understanding of this rule gives a person quite a bit of power. And with power, like Spider-Man says, comes great responsibility. So the average person, average disciple isn't responsible enough to have all this revealed to us, but he gives us this information and speaks around it and tells us that we need to use our intuition to be able to understand this rule completely.
I don't know if this is on the same note or not, but I have noticed before when giving a massage on a person's back, on bare skin, after doing it for a little while, I noticed that I begin to see that the etheric energy, it's kind of like a bluish violet color. And I found out that there were certain spots I would see on the back, maybe like this big, that were like same color but darker, like in a shadow. And
Yeah.
I tell the person, look, I think there's a sore spot, right? And I touch them in that spot. I go, oh, that's the spot. Yep.
Cool. Cool. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, Rick. Yeah, you ought to really focus on that. Now, he talks about the different ethers. The fourth ether, he says, is more prominent in the mineral, and the higher ethers goes to the different kingdoms, like plant is related to the third, the animal related to the second, and then humanity is related to the most intensely to the first ether. It must ever be remembered that from the point of view of reality, what we call the dense physical, tangible and objective, is but an illusion. We are told again and again in the ancient writings that the body is not a principle. He says, why is this so? Because it is only an appearance brought out by the merging of the higher three and the fourth, and thus the appearance is a fiction, a figment of the human mind. He says, I speak not in parables here. Now, this is a very interesting statement. We could probably spend just about a whole class on this. We may talk about it more next week, but he talks about the human body. He says, our physical appearance is not a principle. He says it's only an appearance brought about by the merging of the three higher ethers with the fourth ether. And this appearance is a fiction. So the whole reality we see around us, the whole physical world, is an illusion. The real world, he says, is the ethers that's behind it. Now, this is really proven with quantum physics. Has anyone heard of the double slit experiment? Can anyone tell how that works?
Yeah, in fact, you talked about it just a week or two ago, but
Yeah.
they send.
Why don't you recap it for us, Adam, if you remember how it worked?
They send, is it photons through a piece of paper with a slit, and when their attention's on it, they see it makes a mark in the paper.
Yeah.
And then if their attention's not on it, then it seems to disappear and it doesn't go through, or something like that.
Right. What happens? They take a photon of light, and they can also use other subatomic particles, and they shoot it through a double slit. Now if they take note of which slit it goes through, it's going to go through one of these holes. Okay. If they are watching and see which slit it goes through, it will assume the role of a particle, like imagine a BB or a bullet. It goes through one of these holes, and then when it lands on the other side, it makes a mark. Okay. So that means it's like a particle. Okay. But if they're not watching, if they don't take note of which hole it goes through, then it hits the other surface like a wave. It's like a giant wave. And so it's not a particle at all. So this produces a conundrum for the scientists. I mean, this has puzzled scientists more than probably anything else they've ever come across. How in the world does this happen? So they've done a bunch of experiments for this, and then they've even done it with meditators. They got a bunch of these meditators together, and they said, now we want you to, as we shoot the photons through one of these slits, we want you to visualize it going through one or the other. And so just them visualizing it going through one of the holes made it go through as a particle. Okay, so the consciousness of people not even being present, visualizing this, influenced the beam to be a particle. Now, what does this tell us? It tells us, it goes along with what DK here says. In other words, we have a physical particle that when nobody is looking at it, it's not a particle at all. It's a wave function of some kind, okay? So does this mean that when you are not aware of physical reality, that physical reality is not physical at all, but is something else? Now, DK also says this, which is very interesting. He says that if a person can put himself in a state of mind to where his attention is totally not on his body, something very magical will happen. Do you know what that, anybody guess what that is? If your attention can be totally taken off your body, what will happen?
Your body will be healthy and well. It'll take care of itself.
Well, that may be an offshoot, but there's something else, something even more magical than that. If you can take your attention totally off your body, what will happen?
You can pass through walls.
You're really close there, Adam. He says you will turn invisible, and you'll also be able to pass through walls. Okay. In other words, what makes our body physical is our attention on our body. We've all got attention on our body. If you don't think you got your attention on your body, just pinch yourself. You know? So, or if something threatens your life, just see if your attention isn't on your body. So if you can take your attention totally off your body to where you do not feel anything connected with your senses at all, he says you can disappear. And this is one of the characteristics a master has. A master can take his attention totally off his body and become invisible. So that'd be a cool thing to be able to do. And then when he puts his attention back,
I think it has to do a lot. I think it has to do a lot with vibrations also. When you can take the mind off the body, but to disappear, you would have to reach a certain rate of vibration, and that vibration would separate the two.
well, that would probably change the vibration. But anyway, that's what he says, is that in the book, The Light of the Soul, is that to take the attention off the body, which would certainly alter the vibration, that's for sure. Okay, so that's a really interesting thing. So I've been doing a lot of thinking about this quantum physics, and I think the universe is created in such a way that it's the physical appearance of the universe is sustained by the consciousness of the lives in it. And when the consciousness, now that doesn't mean if your consciousness isn't focused on something that it doesn't exist. If your consciousness isn't focused on your body and you're invisible, it doesn't mean your body's gone. Your etheric body is still there, and all the ingredients of your body is there. But just the light from our physical body is dependent on consciousness interacting, producing our body to act as a particle. Just like on the double slit experiment, when the consciousness is on it, the particles are there. When the consciousness isn't on it, the light is still there, but it manifests in a different way. So it manifests in a more real way in the real world of wavelengths, because in the real world, everything is wavelengths. There's no such thing as a particle in the real world, because everything is a function of waves, the original wavelength. Okay, interesting subject.
It also shows the importance of energy following thought. when you're not looking at the light particle, it acts in a certain way. And then when you give it thought, give it energy, that energy interplays with that wavelength and causes it to turn into a wave instead of a particle.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's very mysterious. It's causing a lot of scientists to consider that there's something beyond physical reality. So it's really baffling them. Like say, even Einstein was baffled by quantum physics. He figured there had to be a material explanation, but he could never figure one out. But okay, any other comments or questions before we wrap it up?
Yeah, so our homework this week is to disappear.
Yeah, see if you can take your attention off your body, Rick, and make it disappear. Maybe
No,
make
the
it
ne- the
reappear
next
as a
step
young
is-
man. How'd that sound?
Yeah, the next step is to reappear. I'll be over at your place and reappear for dinner, Joe.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Well, if you can do that, I'll certainly make you dinner.
Wings.
Okay.
There are several stories about Christ disappearing when they are after him, actually, in the Gospels.
Yeah.
When he
They-
disappears, you know.
They tried to throw him over a cliff, and he disappeared.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, time's up. So
Thank you,
if there's no
JJ.
more comments or questions, we'll be signing off, and we'll see you next Sunday at 10 in the morning.
Well, I just wanted to know, how would I look around and recognize the 4 types of ether?
Yeah, that's a good question, Ed. Why don't you bring that up next week? Or if you get any light on that subject. That's a very difficult subject that DK doesn't give a lot of details on. Wish you would have given more on that, because I can see at least one of the ethers, but I personally can't differentiate between the 4. But anybody else? Yeah, I don't know anybody that claims to be able to see the 4 ethers. So I think you have to be pretty close to being a master to be able to do that. Okay, no more comments or questions? We'll be signing off. We'll see you guys next Sunday.
Or Tuesday, if you want to join a gathering of lights, just for fun.
Okay.
For fun and information, new knowledge.
Yeah.
Get a hold of Curtis if you want to have some more fun with Curtis and bunch. We'll see you next week then.
Thank you so much. Thank you.